There's a lot of videos and articles out there that will collect all of the little tidbits of information out there on games that are not yet released. It's really to just kick up some excitement around the games and kick up whatever information we have on the games and combine it in one small spot, and to get views. So consider this my attempt to do all of that, but I didn't want to just cover one game. I wanted to make this as useful to you as I possibly could. And in this video, there's not a ton of information on any of these three games. So I might as well combine them all into one video and give you like the highlights so you can get through all the information we have so far and kind of see where these games are going and what to expect. Now keep in mind that all of these games are still fairly far off and the studios have been pretty tight-lipped, but we do have some information and we have some that might give us some hope for more coming in 2023. There's a specific reason why. So the games that we're talking about are going to be Dragon Age 4, Fable 4, and Elder Scrolls 6. I will be talking about them in reverse order of how I think these will release. So we'll be starting with the game that I think is the farthest out and ending with the game that I think is the most imminent. Perhaps even in 2023. But let's get right into it and talk about these games. Despite the announcement all the way back in 2018, which was honestly more of an acknowledgement that Bethesda hadn't decided to endlessly iterate on Skyrim for the next decade than anything else, we've heard very little about Elder Scrolls 6. What we do have is a loose timeline for when it might release though. Todd Howard has stated the game will release after Starfield. Now, Starfield is inching closer to release after an initial delay from November 11th, 2022 to now for the first half of 2023. That doesn't mean we should expect Elder Scrolls 6 in late 2023 though, or even in 2024 for a couple reasons. First, because Xbox head Phil Spencer has already talked about how Elder Scrolls 6 will actually be coming after Fable 4, which is going to be coming after Starfield. So we have this kind of loose idea of when these games will be launching, with the first domino to fall being Starfield. When Starfield launches, we'll have a better idea of when Fable, and then when Fable launches, we'll have a better idea of Elder Scrolls 6. There's no telling how much time they want between these games, but with the anticipation around them and the immense amount of work that is going into each one of these monstrous games, I wouldn't be surprised if you had at least a year in between. With my mostly nonsensical math, that would put Elder Scrolls 6 no earlier than 2025, probably closer to 2026. As for location, there's pretty rampant speculation that was going to be in Valenwood, the home of the Bosmer, a still unexplored area of Tamriel, alongside Elsewhere and Blackmarsh. At least in the single-player games. Elder Scrolls Online has explored a lot more than the traditional single-player games have, with each of its expansions, DLCs, and base game. PC Gamer, Tech Radar, and others have delved into the possible different locations, and I could repeat those here, but essentially what it comes down to is it's in Tamriel, there's rocks, and they may be high rocks. So rocks, high rocks. That's about what we got. It could be any number of places. We also know that the game is going to have a massive scope, which really shouldn't come as any surprise, because they're expecting this game to have a similar lifespan to Elder Scrolls Skyrim, a game that still pulls people in over 11 years from its initial release, and still gets new console ports to this day. Todd Howard's exact quote was, "You have to think about, okay, people are going to play the next Elder Scrolls game for a decade, 2 decades. Well, shit. Let's hope it's closer to the 1 decade and not the 2. Can we break even on the 1.5, 1.5 decades? What do you say, Bethesda? 1.5 decades for Skyrim, and then we get Elder Scrolls 6. While we obviously still have a long time to wait for this game, let's hope it still brings the same kind of memories that Skyrim and Morrowind and so many others did, Bethesda bugs included. Now we move on from Elder Scrolls 6 to Fable 4. Fable 4, I suppose, as it's just called now, Fable, since it's kind of like a soft restart of the brand. after, the original studio was closed. It's one of those games I didn't see coming, but I was pleasantly surprised about. But it's also probably the game out of these three that has the most to lose. First, let's get the gross part out of the way, or one of the gross parts. It's expected to be an Xbox exclusive. Now, it should be noted that an Xbox exclusive now doesn't necessarily mean it will not be on PC. So while you likely won't be playing Fable on your PS5 or your Switch, it should be much more widely accessible than the series used to be. Xbox exclusivity heavily limited the ability for me to play Fable games in the past, needing to rent the game and play them on friends' consoles since I'd picked Sony. Yes, I'm that old. I used to rent video games, but Fable was a series worth doing that for. It was one of the first RPGs that made your actions feel consequential, and not just because you got Demon Horn. But remember I said there might be more gross parts to this? Well, part of it may be the fact that it's not the same studio making the game. There's some understandable trepidation around this version of Fable. It's not being made by Lionhead Studios, which closed in 2016. Development apparently picked up shortly after, as a developer from Playground Games, which is making this new Fable, tweeted out that they've been working on the game for 4 years back in 2021. Playground Games is best known for Forza Horizon, which has caused quite a bit of head scratching because it's not exactly a Fable game, but we at least know the game is going to be beautiful. There are also a host of industry veterans working on the game, from titles like Borderlands to Control to GTA 5 and Batman Arkham Knight. So whatever they do make, it's probably going to be pretty special. They even have some of the people that worked on the combat for the Witcher series working on the Fable game. I just hope it holds on to Fable's sense of humor, which from the only trailer we've seen, it seems like it will. For a release date for Fable, we can look back at the news we had on Elder Scrolls 6. It's going to be after Starfield and probably before Elder Scrolls 6. I think this one, like Elder Scrolls 6, we just need to wait for the Starfield launch for some of the dust to settle. Perhaps we'll get some news on Fable in 2023, perhaps at the Game Awards of 2023. Especially if Starfield does well and is up for an award. Why not capitalize on that good momentum? But what if Starfield does poorly? Could they then try and shift attention to a new game, or would they hold off? Whatever happens, they probably want to take too much of a spotlight off of Starfield, because that's going to be their shiny new toy, their new IP, and what they're interested in showing off. Let it glimmer for a little bit before shifting to their next toy in the toy box. Speaking of the next toy in the toy box, and actually from a completely different place, Dragon Age 4. Dragon Age. I am one of the few who found something to love in each iteration of Dragon Age. Dragon Age Origins was the first RPG I absolutely loved after my time in Baldur's Gate Dark Alliance and Elder Scrolls Morrowind. It was a game that kind of set the tone for me about player choice and decisions and how you could impact the world. Dragon Age Origins remains one of my absolute all-time favorite RPGs, and one I'm currently playing through again to get a better handle on the branching lore. Like Elder Scrolls 6, we got our first teaser for Dragon Age 4 all the way back in 2018 at the Game Awards. So what makes me more hopeful of a DA4 release sooner rather than later? The fact that they're talking about in actual game development terms that are playable. In October of 2022, the GM of Bioware, Gary McKay, announced that Dreadwolf had reached an internal alpha milestone. They can experience the entire game, from the opening scenes of the first mission to the very end. Compare that to the talks of Elder Scrolls 6 being in the idea phase and pre-production, and Fable 4 being not ready to be shown, and it sure sounds like DA4 is further along. It also doesn't seem to be burdened by the same kind of planned out release schedule like Elder Scrolls 6 and Fable 4, both lining up behind Starfield. Honestly, it would really just depend if they want to compete against Starfield. I mean, it's not like there's any other crazy big series that is being worked on by Bioware right now, right? There's not another game that has something to do with space that could potentially be something that the studio is focusing on and doesn't want to load up on releases, right? Now I, like many of you, was disappointed not to see something from Dragon Age 4 at the Game Awards in 2022, but we did get a new cinematic trailer from the game on Dragon Age Day just before the Game Awards, which is much more than we can say about the other two games in this video. Soon, at some point, or any of those words is probably not what anyone wants to hear for a release date, but I wouldn't be surprised if it's in the next 2 years, perhaps even 2023. If a report from 2021 is to believe, back then, GamesBeat reported that Dragon Age 4 was targeting a 2023 release and hoped to start showing it off in 2022. Now, I don't know if a single trailer is enough to say that they started showing off the game, but at least something that we got in 2022. Still, we might have slipped a little bit from that initial plan back in 2021, and we may be delayed until later in 2023 or early 2024. In some good news though, at least those wanting to return to single-player RPGs, Bioware has ditched the live service multiplayer elements for the game. The game is also expected to be welcoming to newcomers and longtime players alike. This is probably welcome news to anyone who is looking at the immense time investment needed to play from Dragon Age Origins 3 Inquisition, but hey, play those games anyway. They're great games. They are excellent games. As a senior writer for the game wrote in a blog post, Dragon Age Dreadwolf has been a balance of providing answers to long-standing questions for veteran fans while making a game that new players or someone who only played Dragon Age Inquisition years ago can get into. DA4 is also looking like the most widely available game on this list, as it will most likely be launching on PS5, Xbox Series X and S, as well as the PC. And finally, we know the setting for Dragon Age 4, or kind of. We will all be going to Tevinter, the city run by mages. Like Inquisition and Origins, I'm hoping the story is more wide-ranging than a single city, or even country, and we've already seen a lot about the Necropolis and the Antivan Crows, which is something we've been hearing about since Dragon Age Origins. While we eagerly await Dragon Age 4, I want to leave you with a quote from the Bioware blog post. Dragon Age is a series that puts you in the heart of a magical world, but what happens while you're there, who lives and dies, who rises and falls, who loves and loses, that's up to you. There are no right choices, only those you make. Now, I want to hone in on this. There are no right choices, they're just the ones you make. For anyone who has been following my playthrough of Dragon Age Origins, from the devs themselves, there are no right choices. So we can all just forget about that. What was her name? I don't even remember her name anymore. It's probably irrelevant. Now, if you're feeling down about how long it's going to be until these games come out and you're really looking forward to a new RPG coming out, well, 2023 is potentially going to be a great year for you, because Baldur's Gate 3 has announced that they'll be launching in August of 2023. And this is an absolutely excellent RPG. It already is in early access, and it will hopefully only get better when it actually launches. They just kind of have to run it in instead of passing at the goal line. No! I covered the 3 pillars of what I thought would make Baldur's Gate 3 such a great game over here. So if you want to get hyped for the game, take a look at that video right there and see what it is that we could really be hopeful and excited for as fans of RPGs in the coming year. Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you have a wonderful day, night, or whatever time it is when you are joining me. I look forward to seeing you again soon.